surrender, will never yield. Brace yourselves, for the storm is near. We'll stand together, have no fear. Our heritage we will defend until the very end.
So as the story goes, in 1877, Chief Joseph of the Nez Perce tribe turned himself over to the U.S. government in Montana and presented a clay 1 square inch tablet with peculiar writing on it to General Nelson Appleton Miles as a gift. When Chief Joseph was asked concerning its meaning and origin, he stated, "The tablet had been passed down in his family for many generations, and that he had inherited it from their white ancestors." He further stated that white men had come among his ancestors long ago. Robert Biggs, a Syriology professor at the Oriental Institute of the University of Chicago, authenticated that the tablet dated to 2042 BC in the 3rd dynasty of Ur. But what does the tablet say? Nalu received 1 lamb from Abishaga on the 11th day of the month of the festival of On, in the year, and Magalana was installed as high priestess of Nana. What records or evidence do we have of this story? Is there a chain of custody? Or if it is not true, can we determine where the tablet came from and why the story was perpetuated? In an internal inventory of collections of the U.S. Military Academy 1927, it states, Babylonian tablet, found at Drehim, held in glass casing at the reference room of the West Point Library. So we see by at least 1927 this tablet was accounted for. However, the tablet was not accounted for 23 years earlier in the 2nd volume of the Centennial of the U.S. Military Academy at West Point, from 1902 to 1904. Yet, in 1959, that same tablet was labeled as Nez Perce pictograph when transferred to the West Point Museum. We can see that its identity as a tablet from the Middle East was lost by 1959. So where did the story come from? Scholars claim that the tablet was more likely received by Charles Heinzelman from Chief Joseph at Fort Coe, Montana, by 1878. It is believed that Charles received the tablet because records show that in 1908, Charles's wife and son donated the tablet to the U.S. Military Academy. Not only that, but also they donated additional items from Charles Heisenman's father, General Samuel Peter Heiselman. These additional items included an, quote, album of drawings, a fine Nez Perce pictograph on a cloth, and a Nez Perce medicine bag, close quote. All this is recorded in the 1908 annual report of the Superintendent of the U.S. Military Academy, Scott, 1908, page 44. Why was General Appleton associated with the tablet then? Likely because he was the commanding officer at Fort Coe, but it likely was Charles Heiselman who processed Chief Joseph. If I were to speculate, I think Charles spoke with Chief Joseph and likely shared how Charles' father, a general, also had a medicine bag. Perhaps he remarked on his admiration, and that led Chief Joseph to share or offer up his tablet. After Charles's death, his family donated all military items he had and what he had inherited from his father to West Point as a token of conquest or a result of previous leadership that came from West Point. Ultimately, the scholars speculate that the origin of the story came from Chief Joseph's surrender, and that the tablet somehow came into their possession from an unrecorded expedition to the Middle East, and happened to obtain a copy of a true record of as a souvenir before those items were actually discovered in Iraq. I think the tablet came from Chief Joseph. That the tablet dated, as was found by the Assyriologists, to 2042 BC, and is a receipt for a sacrificial lamb. But why would that be in North America in 1878 with an indigenous chief. The only record that would justify such an item would be the record of the Jaredites in the Book of Ether in the Book of Mormon. But wait, didn't the Jaredites depart around the time of the Tower of Babel, when the languages were confused? What was going on in ancient Mesopotamia at the time? 2042 BC, the ruler in Ur is Amar Sin, the son of King Shulgi. King Shulgi, who introduced bureaucracy in his empire, he saw himself as a god king. He exalted himself, thus expanding the government and control. And again, he introduced bureaucracy at a higher level than ever before, making the people of one voice, of one lip, one speech, one religion. They're rewriting religion, thus taking away the agency of man. He also reconstructed the great ziggurat of Ur. Right? The biblical story of the Tower of Babel is popularly associated with Nimrod. We know in the Book of Ether, it says that the brother of Jared was taken to the valley of Nimrod. So what is Nimrod? Nimrod is mighty hunter. So find out what that valley of mighty hunter is, or what they referenced as mighty hunter. What was that star constellation to them? Actually, I think it was the shepherd, father shepherd, or something like that. I'll have to look it up later. But Nimrod is also associated with Gilgamesh, historically and popularly. However, the earliest record of Gilgamesh is recorded at about 2000 BC. So this is the third dynasty of Ur, which only lasted 100 years. Right? Gilgamesh is thought to be the fifth king of Uruk that lived after the flood, and that lived between 2900 to 2300 BC. The discovery of this epic caused faith, because we didn't know that this existed until just a few years ago, when the Epic of Gilgamesh was discovered, and it showed a bit of a creation myth, also largely a flood myth. But it says that it predates the time that it was actually written. It was actually written around 2000 BC. But this sparked a lot of faith crisis for people, and caused many to claim that the biblical text is simply a Semitic copy of a Mesopotamian flood and creation myth. However, we do not have any Mesopotamian record of the division of language. And why is one language mentioned only now, in the scripture? We know that the language of Enoch was great. We know, so was there separation of language from the beginning, or only strictly after the tower fell? And what is the tower? Perhaps the tower could be understood in the same context the tower is used in Christ's day. And we hear of watchmen on a tower, we know it speaks of prophets of the covenant. True prophets of the church, the covenant. About 2000 BC, we see great ziggurats, pyramids, all patterned after heaven and creation gods. We see this used in running city-states and empires. We see the shiny ones, or those from the sky, or those from the heavens came. The Anunnaki, we see this all over Ancient Aliens, right? With their handbags and items in their hand, which Ancient Aliens has a field day with. Ziggurats climb to heaven. They're like steps climbing up to heaven. And adorned with gardens. We see these images of gods with wings and handbags and pine cones, but what is it really? These depictions, aside from fringe Ancient Aliens archaeology, we could look at what is actually understood about these. These are meant to depict priests, and the bag is usually actually a bucket, and it's filled with pollen. And they hold a pine cone, which they use to dip into the pollen and apply it into their garden as an applicator of the pollen to help spread that. Instead of bees, they show a priest doing this, or a king. I personally believe this imagery was used to depict how a priest king is the one who nurtures the garden, or country, or empire, or world. Their worldview is very small at this point. that through them, the people can return to an Eden state, right? Here on my corn, bees are not needed to pollinate corn. The wind blows and they brush together, and pollen falls on each of these little strands. They're supposed to be strands, unless the grasshoppers ate mine. But each of these strands represents a kernel of cob of the corn, and so when it's pollinated, those become full kernels of corn. You know? Now think of Deseret, the honeybee, the imagery of the Jaredites taking bees with them. How would they have this done? At the time in ancient Egypt, they actually did have beekeeping. They made clay cylinders and plugged up one end with mud, and they would put the queen bee and the bees in one open end and allow them to go back and forth and pollinate and build their hive. And then they would be able to plug up the entrance if they needed to for transport. Very, very easy, very different from what we do today. But then they would unplug the end, and there they would easily be able to grab their honey and honeycomb. Easy to transport, and also led to me, it led to some similar imagery with the Jaredite barges. The Jaredites are aware of the Noah story in the Ark. You know, that if they are departing around 2000 BC, like the cuneiform script shows a record of them being there, perhaps they're picking up kosher, clean, sacrificial lambs. Even if it is for a different god, it's still a clean lamb. They're just taking it for themselves. They're gathering their flocks and their herds and departing out of the land. Why keep the receipt? I don't know. Is it kind of like just to illustrate this is a clean animal? Is it the record? Is it like a temple record? I have no idea. All we know is that it did make it to North America before those types of items were actually found. Now back to this is I wonder if the Jaredites, they're reflecting on the story of Noah. The story of Noah is being rewritten with the Epic of Gilgamesh in Mesopotamia at this time. Are they wanting to preserve their true history of Noah? Because we're told that the Jaredite record tells the record of all things even from the very beginning, but we don't have all of that. And perhaps we don't have all of that for a good reason. I mean, look at the faith crisis that came just with the discovery of these cuneiform tablets in Mesopotamia, and people going, oh no, this all came from just fled myths. This all came from Mesopotamian myths. But in reality, this is when Mesopotamia is rewriting their history and their myths and their temple procession. Even Nana, the god which is mentioned in that sales receipt for the sacrificial lamb, there is a tale of Nana going to the underworld and the descent of Nana. And I read through it, listened to it, I should say, and it sounded like a temple procession. It also sounded like Nana going to the other side of the world, not to the underworld, but the other side of the world. And the other side of the world is referred to as it is perfect, it is good. Well, if the other side of the world is to be Eden, and this culture's point is to get back to an Eden state, I find that very fascinating, and I don't know how to articulate that whole thing into a short little thing, so I'm going to go ahead and move on. I wonder if the Jaredites, when thinking of building these barges, often reflected on how they transported the honeybees in those cylinder seals, and that has two openings, one on the top and one on the bottom for the bees. The top and bottom would obviously be different for those tight like unto a dish. Maybe they had one similar to that. I don't know. But we still have to come to terms with the timing of the Jaredites. Typically, we look at our Book of Mormon timescale and it says that they went extinct or the Jaredites in the Tower of Babel was sometime around 2400 BC, so 2400 BC. And I tend to think that's a possibility, but let's see if it also fits in this other area of 2000 BC. Like, many criticize the Book of Mormon for the claim of elephants in the New World. So we hypothesize that it was meant, what was meant by elephants. And do we look at it like, oh, well, the Bible talks of unicorns, and that's actually a one-horned rhinoceros that is, I think, is extinct, or is it used like dragon? Um, I I think we all are in agreement that it's referring to woolly mammoths. But then the criticisms come that, well, woolly mammoths went extinct about 10,000 BC. However, that's not correct. As of June 2024, we know that woolly mammoths walked the earth. That was why it was being talked about. That it was all the way to when the pyramids were being built. That they lived on Wrangel Island at 2000 BC. And it's also at 2000 BC on Wrangel Island that humans migrated into the area. Um, and there's reasons why they say that they went extinct. They actually found that they didn't actually go extinct in 2000 BC. The latest evidence on this is saying that they went extinct in 1650 BC. So this is well after human intervention. And it used to be speculated that they went extinct because of inbreeding. Now, the thing is Wrangel Island, they lived on Wrangel Island for 8,000 years without going extinct on a singular island. An entire species, large species, not going extinct in that much time. I'm a bit speculative. They said that perhaps it was due to hunting, that they were overhunted. But what they say, their extinction is basically they're saying that they vanished. They don't see a massive die off. They don't see these bone pits like we see in North America. We have lots of bone pits in North America of mammoths and mastodons. But obviously, it's stated that they date to way, way, way longer ago. And we see that some kind of cataclysm knocked out a lot of them. So, Wrangel Island is between Alaska and Russia. It's just an island just above that corner up in Russia, if you can see on the map. And it's said that these mammoths got isolated there because of the Ice Age. The Ice Age had ended, everything melted. I mean, why would they be that far north if there's no green pastures or anything like that, if there's no greenery already? Um, so I don't know. I tend to think that absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, right? I mean, it's only recently we're discovering these things right now. And they're realizing that, oh, it's not due to inbreeding. Could it be that they went extinct because of domestication by humans? In the Book of Ether, we see the Jaredites come into possession and use elephants, horse, and cattle. Cumins and curlomes, what are those? Like that are good for the use of man, like the elephants? Why give curlomes and curlomes a different name than elephant? How would they even know the name of an elephant? Is it an African elephant that they're familiar with, or is it an Asian elephant that they're familiar with? I would speculate probably an Asian elephant. I doubt that they went down into Africa and then took off because they went north to a land that no man knoweth. And they're building barges, likely because they're crossing an oceanic area that is very, very cold. I can't imagine them passing in the heat at this time in a closed, encapsulated, barge. But if they're going through cold areas, yeah, you better believe that's definitely possible, and that would definitely put them in the path of Wrangel Island. Now, in the Book of Ether, we see elephants pop up at the time of what's Omer, which is what I think about 4 generations in, maybe 5 generations in. And there's lots of migration. There's lots of use. And again, so I think Kurlams and Cumans are animals that they're referencing that they're not familiar with, whereas an elephant, they're calling a woolly mammoth an elephant because that's what they're familiar with. And these likely would be smaller. We know that the mammoths that got stranded on Catalina, or was it Catalina Island? They basically just grew into pygmy elephants until they eventually died out. And Catalina Island's pretty small. So I imagine 8,000 years alone on the island? I don't know about that. I just think that that's what we have. We don't have bone evidence of every animal that's ever existed at every period of time. We have sections of that. We have leaps and bounds and pockets of that, but not a full scale movement of that. And how much of the Canadian wilderness is not explored? How much of North America is not explored? So just some things to consider and reflect on. Um, anyways, I'm going to close it right there. That's all for today. I just wanted to review this little area because it was interesting to me and get your thoughts on it. So thank you for joining me. Put your comments and questions in the comments below. Look at the description, any links I leave, and do you agree or disagree? Remember to subscribe, like, and share. Thanks.
Through the dirt, I'll climb every step. I won't rest until I find what I lack. Like finding a needle in